what motivates me the most is when somebody like that, they come up to me and tell me like, hey man, I just want to let you know, like, you're playing, your videos inspire me. That motivates me to go further, because really that's what I want to do at the end of all of this. When I first picked up the horn and I started listening to all these masters, some of the first people I was exposed to was like, Wynton Marsalis, Maynard Ferguson, Clark Terry, all of these guys. And I was listening to them and I thought to myself, like, I want to make music that's going to inspire somebody the way that I'm inspired by them.
This episode contains adult language and adult humor.
Since when have trumpet players ever been considered adults?
If you are easily offended by these types of conversations, consider switching to the oboe. Welcome to the Trumpet Gurus Hang podcast. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. My guest for this episode is Nathaniel Williford. Nathaniel, well, he's an old soul. At the ripe old age of 17, Nathaniel has already begun to make an impression on the trumpet world. Nathaniel's beautiful sounds, improvisational skills, and command of the trumpet's upper register have earned him numerous awards and accolades. But what's caught the attention of many of the top names in the industry is not Nathaniel's chops, it's his humility, sincerity, maturity, and dedication to his craft. So, pour yourself a big glass, pull up a chair, and let the hang begin. All right, I am really thrilled today for this episode because I am joined by Mr. Nathaniel Williford, who has the distinct honor of being the youngest trumpet guru of all time, or at least up to this point. So, Nathaniel, good to meet you, my friend.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me, Jose.
All right, man. I am a big fan of your playing. You've been posting a whole lot of stuff on social media. And so, as you stuff, what pop up, I click on it and go, daggone, who is this guy? And, it's very impressive. And I'm just so happy to get a chance to talk to you. And I think it's important because being as young, how old are you, by the way?
I'm 17 right now.
At this time, as of 2022, he's 17 years old. So, I think it's important because certainly I've talked to some veterans, people in the business for a long time. Right. But I think it's important for other trumpet players to get to talk to young and up and coming talent, to get a feel for what's going on right now on the scene, as you're coming, into your starting to get into your own, and I think the demands for trumpet players have changed over the years.
Big time.
So let's kind of start with where you are right now. You're down in Florida, and are you studying with Dan Miller? Yeah,
Dan Miller and I. It's funny, we met. I was playing lead trumpet in an all-county band, Osceola County all-county band, and he was the clinician for the group. And I met him, and right off the bat, I would get to rehearsal a little bit early so I could talk with him, and we would geek out about our gear and all that stuff. But we formed a really good relationship. And then we went a little while without talking. And as soon as COVID hit, that's when Dan and I really just hit the ground running. I started studying with him virtually, obviously. And for a long time, we were doing once a week, twice a week. Stuff has slowed down, because, Dan is very in demand down here. He's working just about everywhere that there's a good gig. Dan Miller's at it. And, I've gotten busy here and there too. But throughout it all, we're still connecting, still taking lessons with him, and I'm always in contact with him. And, mentorship to me is just so important. And I'm so grateful to have somebody like Dan Miller. Just top-notch musician, but also everything that he's taught me, I owe so much to him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And talk about mentorship. I'm a big believer in that. And there's a difference between being a teacher or coach and being a mentor. Mm-hmm. Because like a teacher, if I was your trumpet teacher, would probably be more the other way around, you'd be my trumpet teacher, is that, it's like, okay, this is how you single tongue, this is how you double tongue, this is how you do, and so it's like about the technique and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mentoring gets into more of a life approach.
Mm-hmm.
And being the example, so like being like a career counselor in a way, being
Yes.
being family, whether
Yeah.
you think of like father figure or mother figure or whatever, but or bigger brother or anything like that. But it's like being that person that has a connection that's much deeper than just the transmission of some technical knowledge. So the mentor-mentee relationship is really interesting, because as the mentor, you feel responsibility to the person that you're being the mentor to. But as the mentee, you kind of have to have a open mindset as well. You have to be receptive. So, as being someone who's, at your age, when you're working with, you're getting a chance to work with someone like Dan, like, what are some of the big lessons that you've learned from him outside of, just how to play the horn?
Well, one big thing, me and him kind of talked about this recently, and it's funny because we finally talked about it as like an actual conversation, but it's kind of been an underlying idea since we began working with each other. And he just explained to me essentially kind of what we're doing now. He was like, it's equally as if not more important, but the hang is more important sometimes than playing on the bandstand with somebody else, and most of our lessons are hangs like that. He tells me all these stories about being on the road with Harry Connick, and he hooked me up. I took a lesson with Roger, so he would tell me stories about being with Roger. Same thing with Bobby Shue, and just all of these life stories about what his journey has been like. And we talked about his experience with Maynard, all of these things, and it really addresses kind of like an approach to have on things when I get to that point. And also like the attitude or the way that I should carry myself when I get to that point as well. He just talked about that sense of community, hopefully, because it's not always like that, but we've talked a lot about that, about the hang and what it means to be a good person. Because when you get on a tour bus with some of these guys for a couple months, like, everybody's got to be cool, because if not, it's not going to be happening, and you're going to be stuck real close with each other for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of that stuff, and we talk about like what it means to make music, as opposed, like you said, like having a trumpet teacher is great, and it's cool to have somebody that's going to show you the ropes about this is how you play the trumpet. But Dan and I's relationship, of course, we talk about the trumpet, but we talk about making music, and we talk about like life as a musician, So I would say that's one of the big things too. Probably the biggest thing, like I mentioned, is how important the hang is, because he indirectly, like I said, we've kind of been talking about that. Most of our lessons are hangs like that. So he's kind of been coaching me along for longer than I thought about. But then we finally talked about it, and I realized that to be true with just about everybody I talk to and hang with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and there's there are a couple of really important, I think, nuggets that you kind of touched on already in that. The first one is, the importance of just being a good person, because regardless of whether you're on the tour bus or it's just like if you're in a pit, or just on stage, if you're hanging around people for any extended period of time, you don't want to make it a difficult thing, because it's difficult off stage, and that spills over to on stage, and and so just don't be a jerk. bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's certainly one of the things that, like for someone of your age and your talent, it's very easy, and I have seen this happen, to develop a big head. And the one thing, this is our meeting each other, officially, our first hang. But I know people that have done hangs with you, people like Trent Austin, and people like that, people that I respect a whole lot. And if they say you're a good guy, that means you're a good guy, So, and that's finding that balance of like, you have this confidence in your youth as a player, but also that level of humility and understanding that, everybody that you meet has got something to share with you. And you're kind of like this sponge that just wanting to absorb that because, you've got a passion to be a great trumpet player. So, and Dan, I think is the perfect example of somebody to be a great mentor because of all the things that he's gone through. But I mean, a lot of times people think, well, you can't be a mentor until you're like me, old and gray or bald. and I don't want to see you bald, man, because you got all that nice hair going on. But you're still in a position where you can mentor people. So have you already kind of gotten some people that have come to you for advice, or you've maybe taken under your wing a little bit to kind of help them along in their path?
I have. There's a couple of people that come and ask to study with me and stuff. And then sometimes it ends up being like a trumpet lesson that we talked about. But there's some people that come up to me and have that I can sense just that hunger. And I recognize it because it still exists and is prominent within me, So there's a couple of people that I come across, and that to me is the coolest thing. And what motivates me the most is when somebody like that, they come up to me and tell me like, hey man, I just want to let you know, like, you're playing, your videos inspire me. That motivates me to go further, because really that's what I want to do at the end of all of this. When I first picked up the horn and I started listening to all these masters, some of the first people I was exposed to was like, Wynton Marsalis, Maynard Ferguson, Clark Terry, all of these guys. And I was listening to them and I thought to myself, like, I want to make music that's going to inspire somebody the way that I'm inspired by them, So when somebody that's hungry like that comes up to me and asks to study with me, or just to say something like that, to me, that motivates me the most. And it also makes me realize, again, how important that mentorship is, because I've been so lucky, with Dan, and another one of my big mentors is Wayne Bergeron. Wayne has another one of those people that's just always there for me, telling all these stories and things like that. And I feel privileged when I get to share just a little bit of insight with somebody like that. Obviously I don't have anywhere close to the years and years of experience that some of my mentors have, or mentors in general, but it makes me happy to be able to share just a little bit of stuff that I have experienced along the way already.
Yeah. Well, and that's a big reason why I wanted to get you on this, because we learn by experience. That's the way that humans learn. But the thing is that the experience doesn't have to be your experience.
Yeah.
So you borrow the experiences of others. So that's why, getting into these kind of relationships is so good, because, if you're hanging out with Dan and Wayne and, cats like that, they have got so many years of experience. And when you put it together, you've got 2 lifetimes, maybe 3 lifetimes, considering how much Wayne works, of experience there that you add to your own things that you're going through, because there are certain things that you're not going to be able to learn from anybody else. You got to experience them yourself.
Yeah.
But you do have some things like where, somebody like Dan can say, yeah, okay, look, man, if you're going to be on the bus, you gotta be cool, because, that's not going to work. Or Wayne saying something like, hey, look, if you got a lot of sessions coming up, then here's some things that you need to think about in terms of, how to pace yourself. And so you learn all these things so you don't crash and burn along the way. And then being able to put it through your own unique perspective, because the demands of the modern trumpet player have really changed.
Oh yeah.
And much of it is in part to people like that Wayne Bergeron guy, who I just want to strangle sometimes. I love Wayne. I consider Wayne to be a dear friend as well. But as you have these guys like Wayne and Roger, who have kind of raised the bar, like for a lead trumpet player. Then you've got people like, Wynton, who's just, is Wynton. So you've got all these things that, like, okay, well, now this is the standard. The standard went here. So now it's no longer, as a lead trumpet player, it's no longer good enough to be able to play a high F.
Yep.
If you're playing Gordon Goodwin charts, you got to have a lot more than that, because
Yeah.
those charts are written for Wayne. So your demands are a little bit higher. So being in the position that you're in right now, what do you see as being like the critical skills that young players, or actually even older players, need to develop if they want to be competitive in this market?
That's a good question. For me, this one is almost pretty obvious, but I think it's a lot more serious than people just acknowledging it. But it's this sense of like versatility, because no longer are the days. I mean, for most of us, obviously, somebody Wynton is already doing it. If Wayne decided to do just one thing for the rest of his career, he'd probably be all right because he's Wayne, you know. But for a majority of us that are like up and coming and things like that, it's not really realistic, you know, to just play straight ahead swing and be able to pay your bills and stuff like that, you know, or to just do this or that. So this sense of versatility and like being aware, and Wayne talks about this a lot. I've talked to him about it, and he's talked about it in a couple interviews, you know, of like having a good understanding of multiple different genres of music so that you can authentically recreate it and not just, you know, play the notes that are on the page, you know. So to kind of have this respect for music in total, as opposed to just the specific genre or subgenre of music that you're into, you know, because you can always have your focus, you know, you'll love playing bebop, you love playing lead, you love playing orchestral principal trumpet, but to have a wider lens and to appreciate all kinds of music, I think is super important, especially as trumpet players. I mean, the application for the trumpet exists in so many different places, you know, even some of the top hip hop and rap artists, you know, they have small bands performing with them at Coachella and all this stuff. There's trumpet players up there, you know, that's a gig too. You know, you can't be like, oh, well, I play bebop, I'm not going to take this good amount of money touring with whoever it is. You know what I'm saying? Like it's got to be a little bit more open-minded. And I would say another important thing, this is specifically for young players, because this is kind of something that I went through and I still go through. Like when you're alone and in the practice room, and if you're serious about wanting to be a professional trumpet player, a professional musician, I think both of these things are equally as important, but it's important to know the difference between playing and practicing. Because when I was younger, you know, I would be playing for hours and hours a day, you know, which I'm sure was good for my endurance or something. But it wasn't necessarily like a discipline. I'm working on something to get better, you know. I would put on some records and I would play, you know, I'd playing along with Maynard or whatever it was back then. And it wasn't until a little bit later on that I became aware of like, I think I need to start, there's things that I'm not good at that I need to get better at, you know, and I need to start working on those things. Now, the one thing I tell people when I say that is, me personally, I don't believe that either of those things should exist without each other. I think it's a very like, it should be a healthy relationship, that because if you're just practicing all of the time and, you know, it's just discipline, you're going to lose the joy that you first found when you picked up the horn. You know, you're not going to be, I got to get the horn out of the case and I got to practice today. And if you just play, you know, you'll get better at certain things, but you're not going to become as well-rounded of a musician as you would like to be or should be. So having a healthy relationship between being able to play, you know, just play whatever you want, and then having some time to sit down and say, all right, my articulation is not that good. Let me do some Goldman or whatever it is, you know, let me do some scales. Let me hone this in, you know. Having those two things, I think, is super important. And like I said, I think that more applies to the younger generation that's coming up, because I'm sure a lot of the older cats have figured a lot of that out, you know. But as long as you start getting that stuff happening inside, you know, you have, like we talked about, an open mind, you're appreciating music as a whole, and then you also understand your responsibilities as a trumpet player, which is different for everybody. I think those two things are super important for where music is going to be by the time we're older and we're the old guys.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, the play thing is really interesting because like in Chinese, like when they talk about like when you do martial arts, they the word that they use, lian, it literally translates as play. So they don't say, "Are you going to practice?" It's like, let's play. And that has a connotation of a level of freedom and enjoyment, even though it can be discipline. It's like, if you talk to LeBron about playing basketball, it's fun, but he's serious. He's serious about those skills. So I think that it's like you were saying, finding that balance between the joy of playing the instrument and the practicing, the dedicated practice, and being deliberate about what you're doing. And we tend to always want to we veer towards what we're most comfortable with. But what you were saying though about playing, it kind of reminded me of I was at a master class that Tim Hagens was giving. And Tim is one bad improviser. That man is bad. And he said something that really was interesting. He's like, "Oh, you should always start your day with free play." Like, 5-10 minutes, like no time, no key, no changes, just get the horn out and just start playing. And express what you feel inside and think more like in shapes than in patterns. And he said that in terms of like developing your skills as a jazz player, creative, by removing all limitations, you start to actually find your own voice. So you're not like, "Oh, here comes the 2/5. I'm going to play this Clifford lick." It's, you're just really taking all those boundaries away. And I think so many people, they lose sight of that time, that the importance of that being able to just do it without any expectations. And that helps you kind of test your limits, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, I agree. And I kind of resonate with that idea of, the first thing in the morning is just play whatever you feel like. Because, like you mentioned, I'm at a point like I'm in love with music and I'm in love with the trumpet. So I can still find joy when I'm sitting down doing a routine over and over again. But there's nothing like playing whatever it is you want to play, because that, like I said, that's what gives you that joy of, we all remember when we first picked up the trumpet and then you played a G or a C, whatever, and you were like, oh my, you're looking at this thing in your hands like it's a piece of treasure, like, oh my goodness, I'm making music on this thing, And I really like that idea of, just first thing in the morning, just play whatever it is that you want, and it's going to be different every day. Some days you're just going to have time to play. Some days you're just going to have time to practice. But as long as you keep that happy balance of both in your life, like that's to me, that's the formula for success, because you're going to progress your creativity, the way your mind is working. And then you're also going to progress in terms of your fundamentals, your technique, all that stuff. And if those two are happening in sync, then that's the formula for success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I used to tell my students for practice sessions, and the first one I got was from Bobby, the thing about doing small chunks of practice. It's like, I'll practice for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, then go get a cup of coffee or go read the paper or do something like that, and then to try and keep yourself fully engaged. Because when you're not engaged, then you're not really practicing. And you're not really playing. You're just, I don't know what you're doing. But but saying like, to do things like bookending. So like to do something fun at the beginning of the section, work until you get to that point of frustration. But before you quit, that whether it's 15 minutes or 15 hours, before you quit, do something fun again. So that you always start and stop with something that's enjoyable and makes you feel good about yourself. Because if you stop in the middle of, doing a characteristic study that you've been torturing, then you don't want to go back, because you come from that mindset. So are there little things that you use to kind of keep your chill when you're playing?
Yeah. I kind of resonate with that idea that Bobby said of like practicing in small increments. For me, it depends. I do it a couple different ways. Sometimes it's like that where it'll be like 15 minutes to a half hour, and then I'll chill out for a little bit, and then I'll come back. And then I'll have some days, like if I'm home alone or something, and I can really focus, like there's no outside distractions, where I'll put a couple hours at a time, and really focus on things. But one thing that I really like to do is, just put some records on of like, some legends. And it can be either a transcription that I'm working on. And this is, transcription, when you're transcribing somebody, that can be both play and practice, depending on how you look at it. So for this purpose, like when I'm at the end of a practice session, like you said, I won't necessarily practice the transcription. Like I won't try to transcribe more than I've transcribed. I'll just transcribe the 4 or 5 choruses that I did already. I'll play them, and then I'll just start blowing along with Clifford or whoever I'm listening to. Because at that point, my goal is not to, find out, what he's playing. I just want to play, I just want to have fun. So for me, it's a lot of, it's like that, putting on some records and playing jazz, improvising for a little bit over tunes. And at the beginning of my practice sessions, it's usually a little bit of that as well. I'll touch on some things, like I'll play a couple licks, or I'll play a couple choruses. Like one thing I like to do is like mix up. If I'm playing like a blues, I'll play a chorus that I transcribed of Kenny Dorham, then of Clifford and all this stuff, and I like match them together so that it's all in time, And I like doing stuff like that. It's pretty cool, or in different orders. And I just kind of mess with that at the beginning and the end of my practice sessions, because it gets my brain juice flowing. But I'm not sitting there like, I messed up that note, and I'm just going for it and having a good time. That's fun to me,
Yeah. Well, and like you're saying, it when you're younger, you're basically what's happening. You're closer to that point of joy, like you were saying. When all of us first started playing, we decided we wanted to play the trumpet. 99% of us, because we enjoyed it, we loved it. It was so much fun. And then at some point along the way, then it became work, or it became your gig. And I certainly went through that phase of my life. But you're close enough to that beginning of your career where there's still the joy. And the further we get away from that, then the easier it is to lose sight of it. And so that's why I think, young cats like you are so important, because for one, the kids that are just starting right now. So, if you're watching this podcast and you're either a beginning trumpet player, or if you're a band director and you've got young students who want to really become serious players, then listen to what Nathaniel has to say, because he's that guy that's doing it right now. And if you're an old guy like me, listen to this, because this might help to reinstill in you that childlike desire, not saying true child, but that childlike love that we all had for the trumpet at some point. And that's the stuff that gets you through the tough parts. Because if you don't love this, man, you're not going to do all the crap you got to do to get good. Are you crazy?
No way. I mean, the trumpet is too heavy for that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of heavy, you were just in New York, my friend, recently, and hanging with one of your idols, Mr. Wynton Marsalis. So what was that like, man, being up there and being part of that whole event?
Honestly, that was, I've been lucky. I've met a lot of really good and formed relationships with a lot of really great players. We talked about Trent and Wayne, all that stuff. But this was like probably the most unreal experience for me, because the Century Ellington competition, it's something that Jazz at Lincoln Center normally holds every year. It was a little weird the last 2 years because of COVID, everybody knows. But a bunch of people auditioned from all over the country, of high school level bands, and they choose 15 people, or 15 groups, I'm sorry. And you go, you play, there's a bunch of clinics, all that stuff. It's a really cool experience. Now, my school, the school that I go to now, they have done it before. They've done it 3 times total before I went, And, they've always told us about how great the experience has been. My school's never placed or anything like that before. It's never placed top three or anything. And it's been a long time since we went. The last time my school went was when I was in seventh grade. So I was at the school when it happened. My school was a middle school, high school. So I saw it happen, but it's been a long time. And my school went through a rough patch with some band directors and stuff. We had a funny experience. So, I'm playing lead trumpet in Jazz A. That's the top jazz band at my school. And literally we started getting the music together to audition for it, record the tapes. But my expectations were not, I was not expecting to get in. We were all hoping to get in. We put in a lot of work and stuff. And we found out we got in, and it wasn't like, oh my goodness, we're gonna win. It was like, we made it, just the getting in for all of us. We were like, oh my goodness, who would have thought this was possible? We just came back after COVID, there's just all these factors. We have a brand new jazz director. This was his first year in my school, so we're just on cloud nine. And when we get to New York, it's just that same attitude. We were all just happy to be there. Honestly, like, with the experience that we had, we could have placed dead last, 15th place, and I would have walked away the happiest person in that room. You know what I'm saying? So we were all, our goal when we got there was just to swing as hard as we could, to play the music the best that we've ever played it, the best that we could. So we got there. It was beautiful, meeting all these guys. There was clinics. We got to see Lincoln Center perform. Then they had the instrument-specific clinics. And that's when I got the chance to hang briefly with, Kenny Rampton and Marcus Prunup. I got to hang out with them for a little bit. And then it came time to play. And I think I speak for most of us. I was dead nervous. I was just shaking in my boots. This stage that I've seen Witten perform on a bunch of times, but also other high schools, we used to watch their performances at essentially Ellington all the time. And we're like, oh my gosh, that's so dope. That's so cool, and then just that realization, like, oh my goodness, we're going to be those people in just a couple minutes. We were all dead nervous, but we got up there, and all that I can remember was having a lot of fun, like we were swinging, and the whole time I was sitting there, I was nervous, just thinking about like Witten is in the audience listening to my playing. I was a little selfish in that regard. I was thinking about like, oh my God, Witten's listening to me play. I was scared, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun, and a couple of guys in the band are blowing over some tunes and all that. And I'm just like, yeah, man. And then it kept growing like exponentially from there. We found out we were in top three. And, then we were going crazy because, like I said, my school has never placed, they've never, not even third or anything like that. So we're like, oh my God, is this real? Everybody's flipping out. We went to eat dinner before the finals performance. And then the finals performance was the highlight of the trip for me. We played two tunes from our set, and we had a little bit more confidence because we already played on the stage. Technically the competition part was over. Now we were just playing for everybody. So we got up there, and that was just so much fun. And I got a chance to play with Marcus Prunup. Marcus Prunup came up for one of the tunes. So me and him, we traded, we did a trumpet battle, all this stuff. And it was just so fun. The people in the audience could see that we were relaxed now, so it was a lot. It felt like, if you were in a small club and everybody's interacting, everybody's yelling back and forth and all this stuff. It was beautiful. And then needless to say, of course, like when we found out we won, we were like, wait, really? Because we were not expecting any of that. Everybody was kind of dumbfounded, but it was beautiful. The whole band, it felt like family through that whole trip. We just felt super close to each other. And a lot outside of just our performance, like being in New York and talking with some of the people that there, it really changed my life in a big way. And it really changed my outlook on like what I want to do in terms of my career. Being around such prominent and important people in the New York scene was like, oh, and then like getting to hang with them a little bit, like we talked about earlier. I got the chance to hang with Kenny and Marcus just briefly, and even that was more than enough to like really open my eyes and open my mind to what things would be like. That experience was, the people that went to my school that went before, they said it was life changing, and I'm like, oh yeah. But now after living it, like I can truly attest, that was one of the highlights or best moments in my career this far.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. And that's a great story too, in that I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform well, and like going into that with the, hey, we're just happy, we're happy to be here. And
Mhm.
just, I'm sure that had a lot to do with it, because your expectations, it's not that you had low expectations, it's just that you were grateful for the opportunity, and that let you just
Mhm.
actually play music.
Yeah. Hmm.
And
I
that,
think that's so important, like if, especially in the sense of like a competition, I personally believe that like if you go into it with the attitude of like, I'm playing for first place or I'm playing to win, it shows in the music, because like you can't really offer a full authentic musical experience if your motive is to serve your place in the competition and it's not to serve the music, like that serving the music has to be at the forefront of every gig you play, every performance, and of course, it's not realistic to be that 100% of the time. We all have our days, but as long as you're conscious of that and trying to have that at the forefront, I think that's how you create the best musical experience that you can.
yeah. Well, and I think that's yeah, especially for younger players, whether it's being, in the music competitions, the band competitions, things like that, or when you get into college and you have to do your auditions and your juries and things like that, that when your mind is focused on either winning, or what generally that means is not making mistakes, like,
Mhm.
I can't mess this up, I have to play this perfectly,
Mhm.
then like you say, it gets in the way of the music. And it should always be first and foremost music. And especially with jazz, so much of jazz is about expression and the freedom that exists there. So you're going to kill any creativity if you get up to blow two choruses, and you're worried about playing, hitting every change, then
Mhm.
you've limited your vocabulary,
Yeah.
and you've limited your expressiveness. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that freedom comes in really handy. So you had said that this kind of like changed your outlook on what you want to do with your career. I mean, what happened? What are you thinking now?
Um, in a nutshell, I want to be in New York now. Like that's really how all of that opened my mind to, and I got the chance to talk with Kenny and Marcus, specifically them two the most, about like what that would look like, and what that would mean. And it's difficult. It's difficult to make a living in New York, very, very much so, but they were very encouraging in that fact, and I'm hoping to go to school out there too. I'm hoping Juilliard is pretty high on my list. That's where I'm aiming to be, hopefully. So yeah, that was kind of the biggest thing is that, and it's funny because I kind of came full circle in the sense that when I first picked up the trumpet, I was fortunate enough that like I kind of knew that I wanted to be a musician for the rest of my life as soon as I started playing, like I kind of fell in love with it right off the bat. And I was just like, it didn't make sense to me to do anything else. When I picked it up, I was like, why would I do something that's not making music? So because of that, the first thing when I was that young, um, I wanted to go to New York. I wanted to live in New York. And back then, I have a couple shirts in my closet and a hat about Juilliard. I was like, oh, I want to go to Juilliard and be in New York and make music. So that's where I started, back in sixth grade and seventh grade, all that stuff when I first started. And then stuff changed a little bit as time went on. For a little while, I had my sights set on LA, going out to the West Coast scene and, recording a lot and all that stuff. And I guess the thing that motivated me the most for New York, like the scene in LA, it's I think a big part of the reason that I wanted to go out there and I was more confident going out there is because I was kind of thinking about the LA scene as it was in the like 80s or 90s. And it's important to recognize for all of us young people, the scene is constantly changing no matter where you go. But like specifically for LA, it's very different than it was in the 80s and 90s. Like you really do have like a handful of guys recording everything now, and I would hope that if I got there, I could work my way in, and I could, get some kind of work there. But just everything that happened in New York, I don't know. I've been to New York before that, but that was my first time being there on a music related trip. And it felt like home, it felt like, all right, this is where I have to be. It felt like I would have the most space to explore and express my creative self in my music, like that I would have opportunities to play what I wanted to play and all that good stuff. And so, yeah, it kind of brought me full circle back to where I was at the beginning, of wanting to get into that New York scene and wanting to go to Juilliard. So, it's funny, I talked to my mom and stuff about it. My mom knows the most. I used to just, all of these names as time goes on, I'm sure if my mom had a nickel for every time I said, Wayne Bergeron or Wynton Marsalis or Maynard Ferguson. But along with that, when I used to talk about New York and Juilliard all the time when I was younger, it's just come full circle because now I'm back in that same position that's what I want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was recently had a hang with Bijan Watson. So, Bijan is a beast,
yep,
for sure. But we were having the discussion because he's, he was born and raised in Boston and spent, a good deal of time East Coast playing, and then went to school on the West Coast. Mm-hmm. And we were having discussion between the East Coast and West Coast, the difference in the music scenes, and not just the scenes, but the general vibe of music, and LA, this is nothing against LA because some of my favorite players and some of my favorite music come out of LA. But LA is a little more polished, a little more clean. New York has got a little bit of grit, a little edge to it, and it's a different scene. So it has to be something that fits with your personality.
Yeah.
And I just think that there's so much. Both cities have so much to offer.
Yeah.
But for me, I think in terms of like, especially doing a whole lot of like club jazz sort of stuff, New York is the place to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want to do session stuff, definitely LA. If you want to do a lot more of those live hits and small club sort of stuff, there's so much more going on in New York, in my opinion.
Yeah. And one thing too, and this is I talked specifically with Marcus about it because I told him that for a little while I was wanting to get onto the West Coast scene, and get into LA and stuff. But this is kind of like a shameless plug because I know you would use one as well. But I have one of Michael Barkley's microphones, and I'm slowly trying to get my recording set up better. But I hope to do that, if I'm in New York or when I'm in New York, hopefully. I hope to, I can still do some remote recording. And to an extent, there is some recording going on in New York. Obviously not on par with LA, which is a majority of the time in sessions and recording and stuff. But there are sessions in New York. And of course, talking with Roger, Roger does a whole bunch of remote recording. Obviously, Wayne does now too because of COVID. So hopefully, expanding my horizon into some of that. That way, I can get a little bit of both worlds, and kind of dip my feet into both,
Yeah, I can't remember who I was having a conversation with. And it was about that specifically. It was how one of the things that's come out of COVID is that it really showcased how technology has changed and has opened up the doors for remote recording because everybody had to start doing remote recording. There's no other option. So whereas like when I was your age, back in the 1800s, you either had to be in LA or New York or Nashville if you wanted to be, in the recording scene.
Yeah.
But now, you could live in Wyoming if they have internet service out there, and you can, you could do your tracks, cut your tracks, and you can send them. Obviously, you can't do big soundstage sort of stuff. Like when you're playing like for a soundtrack for a movie, you need to be in there unless you're cutting a solo part. When you're playing, playing the beds, you got to be in there with the rest of the orchestra. But for so much of the stuff, especially for like commercial work, like doing horn section work, you
can be anywhere.
Yeah, be anywhere, man. So. That's definitely cool. And yes, that was a great plug for Michael Barkley. Mike, I will cut this and I'll send you a little clip of it so you can put it on.
Yeah. I got mine sitting right here next to me on my desk, great microphone.
Mike's the man.
Yeah.
Man. So like, when you think about your career, I mean, when you think about what your future holds for you, I believe that you have to have this balance between having a clear vision of what you would like to do, what your passions are, and then also have a level of flexibility to basically like improvising. You've got to be able to navigate and be willing to shift when and where needed. So like right now, if you had to paint a picture of where you were going to be, 10 years from now,
sure,
what would that be?
Ooh. It's a little tricky because, like I said, one of the things that's so important to me and one of the traits that I hope to develop about myself or that I look for in other musicians is that sense of, that open-mindedness about music and playing a bunch of different things. For me personally, I guess the places that I hone in the most or my specialty areas is definitely playing lead trumpet and jazz. That's what I spend a lot of my time on. So if we're looking at like what my career could look like, if I'm in New York, especially, I'd see myself, hopefully having residency in some group playing lead trumpet or, just in the section in general, playing some local, some club dates, and stuff like that, playing with a small group. I would love to have my own small group at some point, a quartet or a quintet, whatever the case may be. I do have a love for, kind of like big bands on the road and stuff like that. So I would love to, at that point, have gone on tour with, I don't know, like Michael Bublé or something like that, and hit the road with like a big band or something like that. But I don't think I guess I would say I hope that I don't think I'll be doing like, I don't want to just be a lead trumpet player. Like lead trumpet is kind of my first love, and that's what I do a majority of the time, and I love doing it more than anything else. But I don't want to just be hired to play lead trumpet, Like I want to play my fair share of lead, that's fun and all. But I want to do a lot of different stuff, and play weddings, all that good stuff, just to have my foot in the door in a lot of different places. So I would say maybe have like my home base as a lead trumpet player, commercial trumpet player in New York, but I want to have the freedom to do a lot of other things as well, And then of course, that's not even mentioning the remote recording like we were talking about earlier, So maybe in 10 years, hopefully I'll have gone on tour maybe once or twice to see what that's like, And I'm not talking about any crazy thing, maybe just a couple months on the road with somebody. And then at that point, I would hope to maybe lead trumpet is my home base, but I don't want to be pigeonholed into like, oh, you can only hire Nathaniel if you need a lead trumpet. I want to offer myself to create whatever musical experience it is that you need for any given gig, So I know that wasn't the most specific answer, but
It's good. It's good. You got time. You got time to figure it out. You are what we often refer to as an old soul. you speak with a level of maturity that, frankly, people that I play with that are, in their 50s don't have that level of maturity, which is a scary thing. But I mean, you also you exhibit a knowledge and a love for the traditions of jazz. So I mean, has that been kind of like a part of, has music been a part of your upbringing, or is this just something that has occurred through your experience with playing in school and working with people like Dan and Wayne and people like that?
Well, the funny thing is nobody in my family is musicians. Like when I was very young, there was no music in the household. I mean, of course, there's music playing on the speakers, and I was listening to a lot of salsa growing up and all that stuff, but there was no musicians in the family or anything. And in my elementary school, I was playing recorder, just like everybody else in elementary school. I was in an after school club, but I didn't care about it. I always got caught. I was in extended day too, so I would like skip the music thing and go straight to extended day, and then I would get caught. Somebody would come to extended, and they'd be like, "Hey, you're supposed to be with us," all that stuff. But I didn't care about it back then. And my teacher in elementary school, Miss Silva, she is the one that told me to audition to the school I'm in now. It's middle school and high school. It's an art school, and my school has a wide variety of different arts. There's band, orchestra, dance, creative writing, all that stuff. And when she told me about it, I was like, okay, I didn't, nobody really cares about playing recorder in elementary school, and she told my mom about it, and my mom was like, oh yeah, you have to audition, because it's a nice school, it's an art school, it's cool to all that stuff. So I went and auditioned. I did my little recorder thing, and it was cool, whatever. I hadn't really gotten exposed to any like real music yet, So I got in, and my mom was ecstatic, but I still didn't really care because I didn't see what anything was like. And then they had this day of trying out instruments, to pick what you're going to play in band. And some people watching this might know this, but I started on trombone. Trombone was my first instrument. And I remember picking up the trombone, and I was like a natural in the sense, like I had a pretty good tone starting on trombone when I picked it up. And then I was like, oh my God. It was the same thing, like we talked about when you pick up the trumpet. I was like, oh my goodness, I just made a sound on this thing, and I was playing with the slide, all that stuff. And that like kind of right away is when my love started, because as soon as I was able to get that rental trombone before the school year started, I was spending like every day practicing, and then I was, listening to a bunch of trombone players. And it didn't take me long to get started on trumpet. That same year around Christmas time, it was the day after Christmas, my uncle bought me, because I had been saying I wanted to learn trumpet, he bought me this $100 Chinese pocket trumpet off of Amazon. And this is one thing I'll say is I'm grateful, because if some people have seen the video of, when Trent Austin, and Adam Rappa, they really blessed me and they gave me a horn, back in ITG Miami in 2019. The horn that I was playing before they gave me that was like very, very bad. That was like borderline unplayable. Now it's funny, this $100 pocket trumpet that my uncle got me, I might have been better off playing that the whole time than the horn that was then, it was bad, but it was still playable. And that was like almost like a second awakening for me, even though it was just a few months after my, playing trombone. And I played trombone for a long time, through all of my middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I was technically only playing trombone in school. So I was playing trombone in concert band and jazz. But at home, I was just doing the trumpet thing. That's really all I was spending my time on. Because I had I could play the trombone pretty well, and I was playing like first trombone and lead bone in the band and stuff like that. So I was spending a lot of time on doing what I wanted, is playing the trumpet. So I was spending a lot of my time honing it in, and I just kept falling in love more and more, and I found all these records. I found, I was listening, like I said, some of the first people I listened to. I think Maynard was like the first person that I was like, oh my gosh, and I would get excited, with Gonna Fly Now and Chameleon and Coconut Champagne. But then when I started finding Maynard's ballads from the 50s and 60s, you know, talking about like Around Midnight and People and Tenderly and all this stuff, then it just like started a whole new game for me and like what the trumpet could sound, you know. And I attribute learning on my own and listening to this music as a part of like, it's kind of difficult for me because I feel confident in my skill, you know, but for me it's kind of hard to say that I'm like better than other people because I have these records to listen to, you know, like that's kind of what keeps me in check is when I'm listening to all of these master musicians, even people that I know, when I listen to Dan's playing or Wayne's playing or Trent's playing, and I'm just like, all right, I'm all right, but I'm not all that yet. You know what I'm saying? That keeps me back in home base, listening to these trumpet players or just musicians in general when I hear good music, you know, and listening to like the Jerry Hay horns, all of that stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like it keeps me like, okay, I still have a lot of work to do. But yeah, like I didn't really have a musical upbringing from the beginning, but as soon as I found like these instruments and the music, I kind of like surrounded myself in it, you know, and I made my whole life, my whole everything at school, during lunch, all this stuff. I was just practicing all the time. At home, if I wasn't doing homework, which I didn't do most of the time, I was practicing, you know. So it very quickly became what my life was about.
Yeah. Well, and that was actually going to be the next question I asked you. It was about balancing life as a, you know, as a teenager and being a trumpet player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you catch a lot of flack from your friends or your family about like, Nathaniel, man, why don't you go out and play some football or do something? You know, put that horn away.
Well, one thing, I'm kind of like, you know, I mentioned my school is an art school, and a majority of the people at my school, you know, they don't necessarily want to go into the arts. You know, they don't want to pursue it for the rest of their life, but it's a cool place to be. Now, that being said, a lot of my friends and stuff like that, even before they met me and knew me, they saw the time and dedication that I put into the trumpet. So it doesn't come as a shocker, you know, when they start becoming my friends. And then another thing is I'm really lucky, like I'm surrounded by very supportive people, you know, like when I was in New York, as soon as I got off stage, I go to check my phone and, you know, all of my friends were blowing up my phone like, oh my goodness, you know, good, they were either good luck before I performed or that was awesome if they were watching the live stream. So I I personally like I try to find like a balance, you know, in my life of there's days I'm also a lot of people don't know this and some people don't agree with this, which I understand. But I also am a very big I don't know supporter or but I believe in taking off days, you know. I have usually about one a week. Sometimes if I'm busy, I don't get the chance to do one a week and I have to play all the time. Sometimes it's twice a week, you know, but I usually have a day that I don't think about the trumpet. I'll listen to music, you know, always be listening to music, but I take some time, you know, and it's cool too. Like I'm okay doing stuff with my friend. I'm not gonna beat myself like, oh, I can't go out with you guys because I got a shed. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty okay with, you know, oh yeah, let's go to the movies or something like that. I can squeeze an hour or two in tomorrow, you know, or whatever the case may be. So I'm very you know, I care about the trumpet a lot and a majority of my time goes into the trumpet. However, I try my best to not let the trumpet become my identity, you know, because I'm still a person. I love music, I love the trumpet, but at the end of the day, I'm still Nathaniel, you know. So I try my best to just, you know, it's okay to have fun sometimes or hang out, go outside, you know. I try not to make the trumpet I try not to make the trumpet my limitations in my everyday life, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that, yeah, I hope you never lose that balance and that insight because, you know, a lot of us have done that over the course of our lives. And you always got to remember that whatever you're doing, it's what you're doing. It's not who you are,
Yeah.
And I know so many, especially like trumpet players, it's like, they have an injury or something and they can't play anymore. And yeah, it sucks. And you don't want that to happen. You never want that to happen. But, just because you're not playing doesn't make you any less of a person.
Yeah.
And so I definitely hope that you can maintain that clarity as you get older. So as but as a young cat, what's your take on the state of music, especially the for trumpet players? Are you catching anything that's making you go, yeah, man, this is a cool new direction, and this is something that I would like to be involved in? So what's your take on the music scene?
I kind of, for me personally, it depends like on what level I'm like diving into in the music scene, because like I said, like I'm still a normal person, so I enjoy just turning on the radio sometimes and listening to whatever on the radio. Now, that being said, I'm pretty much never going to turn on the radio to listen to anything of musical substance for me, because a lot of that is gone. If I had been around during the days when, the Jerry Hayhorns were on the radio, I mean, I'd be being exposed to the top-notch stuff all of the time, And unfortunately, those days are no longer the case, But I do believe that there is good music everywhere, There's and even in like, the hip hop scene and stuff like that, they're probably not as popular as everybody else, but there are hip hop artists that are, they have horn sections and their chord progressions exist more than out of a 1-6-2-5, all this different stuff. So I think there's good music everywhere. I'm not a person like I don't necessarily hate on different kinds of music, because like I said, like to call yourself a musician and not somebody that just does one specific type of things, there has to be a respect for all music. And that's not to say that you have to like all kinds of music. Like I won't say any specific genres of music, but there's a couple of genre music that I just like. You could offer me $1,000 for a 1-hour gig and I would say no, because I don't want to be playing that kind of music. But there's still a respect for the people that make that music. And, because all music is a form of self-expression. So to disrespect somebody's way of self-expression is to disrespect somebody's character, to disrespect their being. You know what I'm saying? So, all music has its own thing. And part of me, I don't know exactly, because I wasn't around in the 60s to the 80s, when all these guys were, making a living doing one specific thing or whatever the case may be. All I know is the music scene now, I hear stories about what it used to be like, but all I've ever been exposed to and all I ever will be exposed to is what it is now and what it will be moving forward. And because I don't have, a lot of guys that have been around for a while, that talk very negatively about the current music scene and where it's going. They're like, oh, back how it used to be. And I think they're justified in saying that to an extent. Things are different. And for a lot of them, it's turned out harmful, not as much work and stuff like that. But as a person that's coming up in the current and evolving scene, I see a place for myself. I see a place that more young people like me can make a name for themselves. The one danger in it being easier to make a name for yourself is that when it becomes easier or more accessible, it also becomes more difficult because there's a lot of competition. You know what I'm saying? So maybe there's not as many gigs like that. But as far as, making a name for yourself, because I kind of look at it as, instead of being like something totally new, I almost like try to draw like equivalences between now or comparison is a better word, between now and what it would be, So, you think of guys like, Bird and Dizzy and Miles and all this stuff that had, even in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, they had names for themselves. Everybody knew who they were. No matter where they were going, they could walk into any club and people knew who they were. And nowadays, you can't really do that without a social media presence. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I draw the equivalence, is that, like, it's different, it's different. But now it's also just as difficult, if not more, because the competition hasn't necessarily changed in the context of the competition. It's just changed where the competition is. Before, it used to be headlines and papers or on the radio and stuff, and now it's social media presence, where's your name being and stuff like that, So I just think I think a lot of qualities of the music scene have been retained as opposed to lost, that a lot of people think. It's just in a different form now, So as long as you're aware of that, and most of us young and up and coming people, when I was super young, I mean, touchscreen phones and stuff were around and stuff, but it wasn't like the iPhone now. However, we kind of grew up with the evolution of phones and stuff. So we know how everything works. We know what social media is like. We know what our devices are like. So now it's just like you kind of got to dig a little bit deeper into that, and there's a beautiful community of social media. You can find your niche in a bunch of different places, but it also is difficult to make a name for yourself because there's so many, So yeah, I think especially for the young and up and coming people, there's a place for all of us in the music scene. It looks a little bit different, but it's not the end of the world. I don't think human culture or society will ever fully exist without music as we know it. A lot of stuff is computerized, and that's cool. It's detrimental to us as live musicians at times, but I don't think we're ever going to reach a point in time where all music is computerized. Like, we as humans, we can't live without that authenticity that we get in a live performance or live people. So I don't think it'll ever get to that point. I hope it doesn't, at least, because then I'll be out of a gig too.
Yeah, got to start programming, man.
Yeah.
So actually speaking, do you do composition, arranging, things like that?
I haven't messed with it. In COVID and stuff like that, I kind of dabbled in it. I like, right now, I would not call myself a composer or arranger or anything like that just yet. I've done a couple of my own things, like just a couple months ago. I now have a flugelhorn because, Trent is like the best person. So he hooked me up while I was in San Antonio. But a couple of months ago, I had brought, one of those flugelhorns home from school. And I had been listening to a lot of Joe Henderson. I was listening to Recordame a lot and all these different records. So I pulled out my microphone and opened up GarageBand, and I kind of started doing like an arrangement of Recordame. And all of the arrangements or the compositions that I've done, this is a big part of why I wouldn't call myself a composer or arranger just yet, is like, I just set up the microphone and then I start playing. And so I lay down a track and I'm like, okay, that's cool. What do I hear next? And then I lay down that track. Like, I haven't really done like where I'm sitting down and I'm planning out or writing out a thing, whatever it is. I kind of just sit down, record a line or a background or something. And I'm like, oh, can I harmonize this? Can I add a different rhythm to this? So it's just it's for fun for now. Hopefully I get better and, I can plan stuff out and all that. But for now, it's just, yeah.
That's the thing, is like there are a lot of great players that never really dove into composing and arranging that much. It's like, playing was more their bag. Mm-hmm. And, there's nothing wrong with that, mm-hmm. and so just, follow your passions.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I tell you, we got 3 standard segments we got to get through in this episode. And the first segment is brought to us by our mutual friend, Mr. Michael Barkley of Barkley Microphones. That's right. Best ribbon microphones that you could get for under the price of a car.
Yeah.
So this is all about sound concepts. It's called Sound Off. And so, how do you approach, especially being in the situations where you have to kind of bounce between being lead and playing jazz and maybe some other things you have to do. How do you approach tailoring your sound to the right circumstances?
Sure. I think, at the beginning, when we all pick up the trumpet for the first time, none of us sounds good. We all sound bad tone, all this stuff. But as time passes along and you play more and you listen more, you start to develop your sound quality. You start to develop your own sound. And everybody's sound is a little bit different. But like you said, it is important to be aware of the musical context and what situation you're playing in. So one thing that's important to know is that for the most part, unless you make some like drastic change in your gear or something like that, like you're gonna sound like you in just about every situation. But to me, it's more of about like what color in your sound do you want to emphasize more than the rest, So like when I'm playing lead trumpet, obviously I'm not gonna play a 1 1/4 C. I mean, there's people that can do that, which is cool, but I'm not gonna play 1 1/4 C to play lead. So the equipment is part of things, but I'm thinking about like a sizzle and a fatness in my sound. I'm not necessarily trying to change my sound. I'm just trying to emphasize those colors or characteristics that are already in my sound, and bring that to the forefront. And if I'm playing principal trumpet in the one ensemble, I'm thinking about a more rounded, a little bit darker, perhaps. And I don't think these words have to be used like opposite of each other, but I'm thinking about darkness as well as brilliance at the same time, So I'm always thinking about, I sound like me, and there's probably somebody that could do it, but I'm not gonna magically sound like, I don't know, Chris Martin or Bud Herseth, that's not gonna happen. But I'm gonna tailor my sound for whatever gig it is that I'm looking for. And I do think gear is a part of it, for different gigs. And another thing that I'll say that's important in, if I'm highlighting different colors or characteristics in my sound, then that also means that I have to know what my sound is. And I think, to get to that point, you have to play a lot, you're playing your long tones and all that stuff. So you get your technique and stuff happening, but also listening and trying to imitate different players, I forget what it, oh, that thing that Clark Terry used to say, he would say it in the context of like improvisation, but it goes for just about anything in sound, when it's like imitate, assimilate, and then innovate. You know what I'm saying? So imitate all of these people, whoever sound you like, and it can be a huge variety. Like nobody should be able to tell you who you have to listen to or who you should try to sound like. I mean, in the same day, probably spanned across a couple hours, probably not right next to each other, but I'll be playing along, with like Maynard's around midnight. And then maybe later in the day, I'm trying to sound like Bud Herseth playing Mahler 5. You know what I'm saying? Like just this variety of different stuff. And that assimilate is it starts to come out in your playing, I'll be playing a ballad in jazz, and maybe Maynard's vibrato starts to come out, and I'm like, oh, okay, that happened, or maybe I'm playing a solo in one ensemble or symphony, and then it's just got a little bit of shininess around the edge, like Bud did, and eventually in all of that, I start to find, all right, so my sound is like this, I tend to use this kind of vibrato, I sound bright, I sound dark, I sound brilliant, whatever it is. And then from that point on, in whatever musical context I'm in, all right, I can back off a little bit. Sometimes, as far as sound goes, you need to lean into a little bit more. Don't overblow, but you need, sometimes you need to lean into it a little bit more, all that different stuff. So I think it's important, first and foremost, to find what your sound is. And I try to address that as just sound quality, because to find your sound as like a jazz player, that's difficult. That takes a lot of time and stuff. Not get into that, but just what your sound as a trumpet player is, the quality that comes out of the end of your belt. So figure out what your home base is. Once you get that dialed in, you'll find like you could put in a shallow mouthpiece or you can put in a huge mouthpiece, and you can still tell that it's you. It's just a little bit, like I said, one part is highlighted and then maybe another part is dampened down a little bit. Either way, so find your sound and then you can manipulate it a tiny bit for whatever context.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Okay. Let's move on to our next segment. The next segment is called Geared Up. It's brought to us by Venture Mouthpieces, Venture, where technology, design, and craftsmanship intersect. Use the code TrumpetGurus21 to get 10% off your order. And this is about gear. And I think let's kind of keeping it in relationship to what we're talking about with sound. And I guess maybe more for, let's think about it for that student who's decided that the trumpet is the thing that they want to do, and they're making that step up, just like you've been making that step up into the next phase of their development, their career. So what kind of advice would you give to a young up and coming student about upgrading their gear game, what sort of things they should think about, and how that affects their ability to do what they need to do on the instrument?
Sure. So for the young player, that's maybe upgrading from a student model horn or something like that, I'm under the belief that a majority of people play a mouthpiece that's too big for them, especially at the beginner level, because if you're starting trumpet in early middle school or elementary school, whatever the case may be, you've got this tiny face. A 3C can feel like a tuba mouthpiece on your small chops, So maybe the mouthpiece is too big and stuff. But as far as upgrading the horn goes, especially now, prices are going up on a lot of different horns. But I believe that you can find some pretty good gear at an affordable price point now. Like one of the first horns that I recommend to everybody at my school or something that asks and they're looking to upgrade is the horn that Trent gave me in Miami in 2019. That's the Austin Custom Brass 2RL. It's their entry-level professional model, and it's like under $1,000. And it's it's built on the sturdy side, compared to like it going towards a student horn. But it's going to outperform those a lot. The intonation is going to be way better. It's not going to have an adjustable third ring. So at different price points, there's different stuff to work with. I don't think, especially your first upgrade horn, you don't need to be spending like 3,000-4,000 on a brand new Strad. That those horns are cool. If you find a good Strad, awesome. But you don't need to spend 3-4 grand right out the gate. Going into your freshman year of high school or early on, and if you're doing it in middle school, whatever the case may be. But as far as like what to look for in the gear, with the people at my school, if I can, I bring my horn in to let them try it, the Austin Custom Brass 2RL, so that they can get a feel. And, and there's some instances where it's not happening, it's like, all right, so we look for something else. But if I'm working with them and like getting them to try stuff and I'm like, they're not there with a teacher or anything, I try to describe as best as I can what it means when you find something that's easy to play. And ease of playing, there's a lot of different ways, because like, for example, for everybody that's played like Bobby's horn, one of the Yamaha Z's, the resistance is real far up front in the lead pipe. It feels close to your face. So if you're a player that is going to use that to your advantage, then that horn is going to be really easy for you to play. You're not going to feel restricted. It's just going to feel easy, you know. Um, Bore size is tricky, you know. There's horns, I don't think bore size matters the most because there's horns that are super large and they feel small. And the horn that I'm playing now, my Warburton, the Carl Fisher horn, it's a medium bore, it's 453, but feels bigger than most of my friends' horns, you know what I'm saying? So it's not, but when you play it, when you get on the horn and you feel that you're not putting too much air and nothing is pushing against you, when you find the happy medium of you're just like, oh, this trumpet is going to play how I want to play the trumpet. That's the direction that you want to go in, no matter what it is, you know. And specs, I think it's cool to learn about specs. Like I'm a trumpet geek, so I like to learn about that stuff, you know, like the size of different bells, what bells are based off on mandrel and bore size, all this stuff. I like to know about that. But at the end of the day, you know, it's just when you play it and it feels good, usually, not always, but a majority of the time, when it feels good, it sounds good because you can be at home, you know. And when it feels good, that creates one less barrier between you as the performer and the audience as the listener, which is what you want, you know. Because I don't like when I'm performing, I don't want to be thinking about my trumpet when I'm performing. I want to be thinking about what's coming out of the end of the bell. And, you know, try to ignore specs. This horn that I've been playing recently, where I played a couple of times when I was in San Antonio, and then they came to Miami and I played it again. Is this new horn that Adam Rapp was making, this Lotus trumpet. And you know, technically, like the bore size is bigger than my horn slightly. He doesn't make large bore horns; they're 460, you know, regular. But it's like the easiest trumpet I've ever played in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like I just get on it, and it's like, oh my goodness, the trumpet wants to play itself. So for me, that's like a no-brainer move. That's the direction that I want to move in. And for different people, it's different things. You know, Arturo Sandoval, you know, he plays super big horns, and that's probably the easiest for him because I'm sure he would not have a good time playing a Z. You know what I'm saying? On the opposite end, I'm sure Bobby would not be having a fun time playing one of Arturo's horns. You know what I'm saying? So it's subjective for everybody. But as far as, you know, sound versus feel, I don't necessarily think that they're polar opposites. Like usually when it sounds good, it feels good. And usually when it feels good, it sounds good. You know, I don't think there's a whole lot of horns that fall in one or the other. Like if a horn doesn't feel right, you're probably gonna crack a bunch of notes, be out of tune, you know. And if a horn doesn't sound right, then you're not gonna be comfortable and you're not gonna feel good. So yeah, I guess that's kind of what I would go and try stuff and ease of playing, efficiency is what I tell people to go for all the time.
All right. Very good. All right. Well, Nathaniel, we have one final segment to get through. And this is our Robinson's Remedy Rapid Fire Round brought to us by Robinson's Remedy Rapid Relief for your sore and tired chops. This is a series of questions that bounce all over the place. And I just need your quickest response. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Let's do this thing. All right. Nathaniel, who's the biggest influence on your life that is not a trumpet player?
My mom.
All right. What's your favorite book?
Favorite book? I would say the child in me wants to say I read a lot. I used to read all of the Percy Jackson books, the Rick Riordan books. I know that's a childish answer. So the child in me wants to say that. But as far as books that have kind of really made me think and that I appreciate, probably as typical as it sounds, 48 Laws of Power.
All right. What is the worst movie you've seen?
Worst. There's this one movie on Netflix. I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's about this lady that she's just kind of has a crazy life. She married this old dude because he had a bunch of money. Then she ended up killing him. and she almost got caught. It's with this actress, Peyton List, and it sucks because I used to like watching her on Disney Channel. But that movie is probably the worst movie I've ever seen. It was pretty bad.
It's so bad you can't even remember the name of it.
Yeah.
So. All right. If I'm going to have to adjust some of these to make them a little more age specific. If you weren't going to become a trumpet player, full-time professional trumpet player, what would you want to be?
I think I would still do something in music, maybe production, because part of I used to want to be in the West Coast, and I think it would be cool being the guy in the booth recording the hay horns or something like that, so probably something like that.
All right. What is your favorite beverage?
Nothing beats an ice cold glass of water.
Oh, okay. Besides a milkshake, I think. You could have a dinner party and invite any 3 living people besides family and friends. Any 3 living people, who would you want to have there?
Wynton Marsalis, Wayne Bergeron, maybe Wim Hof. That's a weird combination, but I would like
the ice man and Wayne.
Yeah.
That would be.
Yeah, it's a weird combo, but I'd probably have them 3.
Okay, well, you've got 3 additional chairs at your table, and they could be filled by any 3 people from history. So any 3 people that are no longer with us.
Most definitely Clark Terry. I know I didn't say this in the interview earlier, but those that are close to me know Clark Terry is my favorite musician of all time, regardless of trumpet, of anything. It's Clark Terry's top of line. So Clark for sure. Let me see. From history, Louis Armstrong. One more. Let's see. Probably either James Baldwin or Malcolm X.
Okay. All right. Again, nice little mix there.
Yeah.
All right. Lacquer, plated, or raw?
I tend not to go for lacquered, so I'll bump lacquered off the list first. I guess I'll go plated, so my hands don't get stinky.
All right. What is your greatest fear?
I would say either not being able to express myself in any capacity, like if I couldn't speak, I couldn't play anything like that. And I guess that's kind of tied into what the alternative would be, is like being completely alone, nobody to talk to, nobody that understands. And I think they're kind of tied because like if I can't communicate, then nobody can know what I'm feeling. So yeah, I would probably condense it to fear of being alone, like just completely alone.
Okay. All right. You could be granted one superpower. What would it be?
Probably teleportation. I could be, no matter where the gig is, you call me and I'm there,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You could actually do multiple gigs because you get your breaks on the same schedule.
Yeah. I'd be all over the place, man. Yeah.
All right. What aspect of trumpet playing do you think is the most overrated?
Range.
Right.
Well, let me specify real quick. How difficult range can be. Range does not, doesn't come natural for most people, but it's not I don't believe that it's something that you have to obsess about or should obsess about, for the rest of your life and just beat yourself up because you can't play high.
All right. And what aspect do you feel is the most underrated?
maybe I don't know if there's a word for this, but the one thing that I think is underrated, when I listen to three trumpet players in particular, Nicholas Payton, Freddie Hubbard, and Clark Terry. And, they're pretty different, but what I hear in their playing is a sense of like being able to dance around the trumpet, and not necessarily just from high to low, but just like whatever they're playing, like the trumpet feels like a toy in their hands. So if there was a word for that, I would say that's what's underrated, because I wish I could play the trumpet like that, that everything just sounds like it's right in front of me.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. This is going to be an interesting one. You can go back in time and give your younger self that's the word for it, one piece of advice about music. What would it be?
Hmm. I think I would say maybe because I'm still super young, so I still have my time, but I don't think it ever hurts if I would have stopped being a trumpet jock even earlier. I don't think I am now, but I was at some point. I had a little bit of natural range, so I used to kind of walk around a little bit with my chest high, because I talked to Wayne about this. I have a similar story with Wayne, like I could play a double high C when I was like 12, like in my first year of picking up the horn. It sounded bad, like it was a very bad sounding double C, but I could play it. So for a little while, I was kind of ignorant in that sense. And if I was playing with my friends, and we're doing like a jam session, it didn't matter what the tune was or what chord I was playing, but I would find a way to play a double C on it. So maybe I would have told myself to stop worrying so much about the trumpet and start worrying about the music even sooner than. And I think that's like, especially for trumpet players, that's kind of a journey that never ends. There's always a little bit there, but maybe just a reiteration of that earlier on.
All right, cool. And while you're back there, you're going to give your younger self one piece of advice about life.
About life. Oh, that's a pretty good one. I would say that I would say three biggest things, I guess I could condense it down to two, is be respectful always of whoever you're hanging out with. Um, and another thing, this is kind of, in my opinion, a big lesson or big thing that a lot of people think about. We hear very often, treat people how you want to be treated. But I disagree with that statement. I believe in treat people the way they want to be treated, because if you think about it, it's pretty selfish to treat everybody in the world the way that you hope everybody will, treat you. And there's a bunch of different ways that this applies, love language and stuff. It's essentially, you could think about it like that. Like, why are you going to show everybody else your love language when everybody is some different kind? So when talking with people or hanging out with people, treat them with the respect and talk to them the way that they wish to be respected and the way that they wish to be talked to, not just how I'm feeling that given day.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Final question for you, Nathaniel.
Oof.
What do you want your legacy to be?
That's deep. Kind of going along the lines of, one of the reasons why Clark Terry means so much to me is that no matter what Clark was playing, and Clark portrayed a lot of emotions in his playing: grief, anger, sadness, happiness, joy. But no matter what I'm listening to, there's a smile on my face in any given context. Because it just brings me a sense of fulfillment, a sense of joy, no matter literally every single recording there is of Clark Terry. I love it. And I hope to leave that behind. And I also hope to, like I said, inspire on the same level that I've been inspired by Clark, Wynton, Maynard, Wayne, Dan, all of these guys. They mean so much to me and they open my eyes. And I hope that one day a young trumpet player, not even just trumpet players, but just people can listen to my music and feel inspired.
Well, I tell you, you have already inspired me. So, everything that I have heard about you is actually pales in comparison to actually talking to you. You are a man of immense depth at such a young age that not only comes out in your music, but definitely in our conversation. You are an old soul. So I look forward to actually getting to do a physical hang with you at some point, so we could sit down over a glass of ice water and talk some more about music and life, and just do that crazy stuff that we trumpet players like to do. But I wish you nothing but the best of success in your life and your choices. And I'm actually I plan on doing this podcast for a little while, but so I hope to check in with you once you get your college plans all straightened out, and maybe we'll have like an annual Nathaniel check-in, just kind of fill us in on your life's progress and stuff like that. So
that'd be cool.
All right, man. All right, so thanks a lot. I really, really do appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this episode of The Hang. And as always, I hope that you like, subscribe, share. Make sure you follow us on all of the social media platforms, and make sure you're following Nathaniel, man. Guy's got some great stuff going on. You want to definitely stay on top of that. So until the next time, folks, peace of slide grease. We out. Thanks for hanging with us today. This podcast is all about creating deeper connections through our mutual love of music and the trumpet life. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast and also like and share this episode with a friend. We want to see The Hang grow for show. Please support our sponsors and consider becoming a personal supporter of this podcast as well. Remember, for less than the price of a bottle of valve oil a month, you can keep this podcast moving smoothly. The Trumpet Guru's Hang is recorded at the Candy Factory, a co-working space and social club located in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Jose Johnson is the executive producer. Post-production editing is by Mitch Bowers. Our opening theme song was composed and performed by Lexi Signor, and our closing theme music comes courtesy of The Greatest Funeral Ever. Incidental music is by Ethan Swayze and Jose Johnson. Graphic design by Ann Kirby of the Sweet Corps. The Trumpet Guru's Hang podcast is produced in collaboration with the So Good Lancaster Media Group.